These modern day conflicts, whether it be the Kashmiri Pundits or what's happening in Bangladesh right now, I see that as a Hindu struggle. A proud Hindu always gets labeled as a Hindu nationalist. November 2024, we are exiting the mandir that we attend, and I get a video forward of this is happening now at Hindu Sabha in Brampton. Oh. My jaw dropped. You can imagine that slavery ends, and then the next day they have to replace the workers. What exactly changed is that they realized that they needed to cut the Indianness, the Hindu-ness, so the idea of worship, of multiple deities, of all of those things, it goes against the 10 Commandments. The first cremation that was done in Trinidad was done in a garbage dump.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to Karthik Unfiltered, a platform where you get to hear unfiltered conversation. Today is probably the most exciting day of my podcast journey because I have a co-host. Hi Muskan, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm very excited.
Welcome
I'm doing
to the
great.
podcast.
How are you? Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So Muskan is a very successful professional based out of Toronto, and I could not ask for a better day for her to be invited to this podcast because our guest today, he's from the Hindu lifestyle, Sean Binda. Sean, how are you doing today?
Doing well. I'm very happy that I could join you on this program and ready for some great conversations.
Absolutely, Sean. Sean, one of the reasons we are extremely excited to have you is because you're one of the creators that has inspired us a lot. You have a professional career, but despite of having to manage a family, despite of having to take care of everything that you take care of, you spend tremendous amount of time and effort and energy into educating and empowering the next layer of leaders in the in our Hindu tradition. You motivate a lot of young kids and Gen Zs to pick up the learnings of Hindu. So we are extremely inspired by you. Thank you for taking your time out.
Yeah, I'm extremely humbled for all the things that you said. When I started the journey that I'm on, that certainly wasn't something that was on my mind to sort of be all of these things. And as time evolved, you start realizing that there are more and more people that are listening to you. And then with that comes a lot of responsibility as well. So yeah, I'm happy to share my journey, and whatever questions you have, I'm ready to do a deep dive.
Absolutely. Muskan, you're one of the reasons why, I really got into watching the Hindu lifestyle content. Yeah. So what made me wanna, talk to Sean, and why were you bombarding my Instagram with Sean's reels?
Honestly, I'm really, really, really inspired by his work. And see, what I see here in Canada is not a lot of people are very open to share their identity. They're not very open to share who they are. I see a lot of people who are born and raised here, don't take me wrong, but they're not very engaged with their own culture, with their own religion. But when I saw Sean, and he was on my For You page, and I started looking at his YouTube, his Reels and Instagram, and that was very inspiring that, he comes from, I think, from Trinidadian Hindu family. And he has never been to India, I believe, right? His roots are not from India, but definitely it says a lot about how his parents raised him. There's dharma, religion, discipline, that's the core of, I would say, I think Sean's lifestyle, and that's what he's trying to spread as well. So that was definitely very inspiring. And honestly, I would say I'm not really, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm maybe not very religious. I'm trying to learn more about my religion, my culture, and I'm no expert like you both. So I'm just here, honestly, to be learn more. Just to learn more here.
Yeah, I'm not an expert here either. But Sean, I would see you as an expert in many, many topics. One of the topics is that the struggle and the challenges. So one of the things that I've learned, Sean, is that, through my personal experiences and listening to stories, Hindus have some sort of ability to be patient with everyone, patient with themselves, and not really, go on a violent or an offensive mode. We have gone through a lot. My ancestors, for example, Muskan's ancestor, she comes from the north of India. They had to fight battles. They've had to pay a lot of religious taxes just because they were not willing to convert to a certain religion. They had to go through a lot just so that she could be a Sehgal today. Similarly, for you to be a Binda today, right? Like for you to have that last name, for you to continue to have this heritage, your forefathers, back from Trinidad all the way to here in Canada, they've had to pay a lot of price. I know that in the last 10 years, we've been watching a lot of movies such as Kashmir Files, and now we saw Bengal Files. But after I started watching your content and what you educated me about the things that your background had to go through, I think Vivek should look at making, Trinidad Files or the Caribbean Files.
Yeah.
Because, let me quickly pull it up and then it's all yours for you to educate us. 1838 is, I believe, first time, a ship came in from India. Slavery had ended, and they brought in someone we call as coolies, and coolie literally translates to slaves in India again. So slavery did not really end during that time. It kind of moved from one group to another group, and that was the Trinidad. Could you educate a little bit more to us about the history and the price that your forefathers has had to pay?
Certainly, yeah. So this all sort of starts with the British Empire. So the British Empire, throughout the entire world, slavery had been abolished. So they had made the proclamation and slavery was going to end. So wherever the British had colonies, they faced a problem is, okay, slavery has ended. So all of their workers, so the Africans who were taken away from their countries and brought as slaves, who is going to replace that labor? And British were in India. So the British East Indian Company. So they saw that as a market. And what was beneficial for them is that they realized that the Indians were good in agriculture. They were good hard workers. So that is what prompted this program known as indentureship. So indentureship literally means contract. So the Indians entered into a contract of either 5 or 10 years, and they agreed to come to whatever island. So the first island was, I believe in 1833, was in Mauritius. So that was the trial that happened there, is that they wanted to see how is this going to work if we bring Indians to work on the fields there, whether it be sugarcane or rice or agriculture. Then the next ship went to Guyana. So 1838 was the first ship that left India, and then they went there. And then in 1845 was when the first ship arrived in Trinidad. And at the same year, it also went to Jamaica and some of the other islands. So when this gets taught, it was not something that was formally taught to me as a child growing up. It's just that you kind of heard stories about it. And it wasn't until I was probably into my later years of high school and into university when I started trying to piece together what exactly happened here. And what is interesting is that when we pass on stories to the next generation, we tend to sort of gloss over the struggles.
Exactly.
Right? We tend to, and that is the history that was imparted to me. So when you bring up that slavery ended and then it was replaced by labor, a lot of how the Indians, the Hindus in the Caribbean view themselves is that they kind of shy away from the term slave. They don't want to be called slave. They were indentured laborers. But you can imagine that slavery ends and then the next day they have to replace the workers. What exactly changed with the system? All it was is that it was imported labor. And this history actually doesn't get taught to many people. And even when you come to here in Toronto and all of the people that I meet from around the world, they look at me and they're like, "You're Indian." I'm like, yeah, but you've never been to India? No, I haven't been there. So then where are you from? I'm like, well, I was born here. My parents are from Trinidad. My ancestry traces back to India.
Yeah.
And this is the constant story and the history that we have to go through. And when you talk about the struggles now, this is where things never get told the way that it actually is, because it certainly was a struggle. And Mauritius was the first experiment. And one thing that they realized from Mauritius, what changed when the Indians went to Guyana and Trinidad, is that they realized that they needed to cut the Indianness, the Hindu-ness out of the population, which is why in Guyana and Trinidad in particular, Hindi and all of the native languages were lost, which is why my name is Sean. Like that colonial sort of environment was forced on those two populations in particular. Whereas when the Indians left to go to Mauritius and Fiji and even in South America, in what is now modern day Suriname, that sort of colonial imposition wasn't there when it came to language. But one of the ways that they tried to strip away the Indian identity was through language. And when you talked about how that Hindu identity persisted, it was through all those battles that somehow they had to figure out, how do you retain all of that? And then my story begins from my parents leaving there in the 1970s, and then they came to Toronto and they established their lives here, and then trying to continue that even further. It is a topic that I try to bring to all of my content, because what I think is important is that the Hindu community realize globally that it is possible to maintain your Hindu identity while not being in India, but still retaining those roots there, and the idea of what India stands for, of what Bharat stands for, as a country that maintained that civilization for so long. And those struggles from thousands of years, that is what goes through our blood, our DNA, which is why when you talk about the Hindu identity persisting in the Caribbean, the struggles that you went through, the struggles that you went through, that all of India went through, is the same that we retained, so that I could stand here and sit here with you and say that I'm proudly Hindu.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely touching. When we go back to our history, right? I'm not talking about just the colonial history. I'm going way back during the time of Mahabharat, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, right? If you really look at that point of time, India was a land that everyone wanted to be a part of. India was a land of wisdom. It was a land of dharma. It was a land of righteousness. Eventually, after we started getting colonialized, this is Sadhguru saying, I really admire him. And Sadhguru said that over the period of time after the Mahabharat war, we lived in one of the most prosperous times. Like, it was extremely prosperous that we almost did not need any soldiers. We almost did not need any men who were willing to go fight a war. And somewhere on those lines, we started focusing on something that is even more important, that is what is within you. So it became an educational hub. That is why Shankaracharya in the Kashmir area, right? It was an education hub. And over a period of time, we completely forgot that we are also known for fighting for ourselves, for our rights. And the first time invaders invaded, they came in, they invaded, they went back, and they looked back and they're like, why are these guys not fighting back? It took some time for us to even start fighting. So that's why I get very emotional when I listen to these stories, because the fight our forefathers has had to fight so we could have a last name that we have is tremendous. So one thing is, I heard that they had to carry, your forefathers, they had to carry scriptures of Ramayana or Mahabharat or Vishnu Puran. They had to tear the pages out, hide it in coconut shells. They had to, memorize the scriptures and pass it on to their kids. So why do you think were the British trying to end the Indian heritage and the Indian identity? What was the reason that they were not allowed to practice what they wanted to practice?
That is a very deep question, and I don't know if I have all of the answers to that. It is something that even I ask myself today. Why would the British want to strip the Hindu identity away from all of the people that they brought? So one thing that I would say is, to maintain their position of power, they needed to belittle and figure out, is that if I want to stay in power, then how is it that I make everyone beneath me feel that they are not worthy of the life that they're having? And one of the ways is to belittle the traditions. So that goes to language, that goes to the pujas, the rituals, the fact that a lot of the British, and I mean, they come from a largely Judeo-Christian worldview. So the idea of worship, of multiple deities, of all of those things is seen as foreign, as barbaric. It goes against the 10 Commandments, the very base level. And in order to maintain their level of that, they want to be the ones ruling the land. The easiest way is to kind of strip away all of that, to belittle it and make you feel less worthy of yourself. And over time, to actually come to terms with this is actually very hard, because I'm seeing it play out today.
Yep.
Here in Toronto, whenever there are public expressions of Hindu identity, whether it be the Ganesh Visarjan or Ratha Yatra or anything that is done publicly, you go to any comments in social media.
So much hate.
And it's from Hindus themselves.
Exactly. That blows my mind. Like, why are you demeaning your own people? Like, most of the hate comes from Hindus
And
so-called secular Hindus.
so this is the problem. And I'm like, what has happened from hundreds of years ago where outsiders come in to India, and whether we're talking about the Islamic invasions or even colonialism, outsiders coming in and belittling the tradition that they come into. A lot of Hindus have internalized it to the point now where public expressions of Hindu identity becomes problematic. And what has now happened in Western societies is that now the argument is that we have come into Western society and now we're taking over by just public expressions of faith. And this is where I kind of stop and I scratch my head. And it's kind of like you're not forcing anything on anyone.
Exactly.
But, when the Ratha Yatra is coming down Yonge Street, going down to the lake, and people throw eggs there, the first comment that I saw is that, why do you have to embarrass us with these parades for? And I'm like,
I saw that too.
who are you embarrassing? And I called the person out. And it's like, what? Someone is throwing eggs at the parade, at people doing what? Singing and dancing and talking about bhakti and all of that. But your first thought is that these Hindus are embarrassing me now. So we have internalized all of those things. Yeah. So I think it comes back to that, is that historically, and if you look at all the scholarship that has come out of this in recent times, is that everything has been a belittling of the Hindu identity. So you don't attack it, and so you don't attack it now by physical force, but it's being attacked on a psychological level. Let me belittle this tradition as being backwards, as being superstitious, as being casteist, as being all of these things. So now that the everyday Hindu now looks at it and is like, well, this is what everyone's saying, I don't want to be a part of it. So that is the idea of what the colonial powers, how they maintain that. And when you talk about taking parts of the Ramayana and bringing those pieces, that is what you hold on to. Yeah. And one of the things that sort of has stuck to my mind is that, when we talk about the caste system and all of that, that's a whole other topic. But one of the quotes that I had put out into one of my videos is that one of the things that kept Hindu identity alive in the Caribbean was not wanting to give up caste. Because this is how they identified. And you can have any modern day criticism of caste, which, is probably right, because you don't want people to be discriminated. But the identity of a Hindu was, I want to walk in the caste of my forefathers. And with that comes all the traditions that, so you could talk about the Ramayana and everything else. And I mean, all of these things that we did to hold on to it was because we realized that somehow internally is that this is who we were. This is who we were. And the struggles of that is what got passed on.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is that lack of knowledge or no knowledge, ignorance is one of the biggest enemy one can have for their self-growth, right? Think about it. Everyone thought the earth is flat. But before that, we had scriptures talking about the stars, talking about the planetary. We had Varaha Avatar, holding earth on his, it changed, right? Mathematics, Aryabhatta came, changed. Before that, there was no zero. So everyone were ignorant about the knowledge and wisdom that we brought on to the table. Now, the unfortunate thing is we are ignorant ourselves, which is, when I say we, a lot of people in my own community, right? Because oh no, I don't like that we had caste system back there. It was discrimination. My question is, okay, which part of the world was free of discrimination? Okay, let's talk about America. There was slavery. That was bad. Let's talk about Europe. Well, Europe is the course of discrimination. They conquered the entire world and discriminated the entire world, right? So discrimination is an unfortunate thing that has happened. It happens every single day. Why Sadhguru says this as well. Why is it that elders beat kids up? Because kids cannot beat them back, right? It is natural flow that someone who is a little bit more powerful, they end up discriminating. This is unfortunate truth about life. But the real reason or the real knowledge is caste system was profession. A Brahmin was someone who took care of the puja. A Kshatriya was someone who fought the battle. Right now I'm a business analyst. Like if you convert that into the modern terms, that's my caste, right? So thank you for adding value in that. Now, what are some of the stories that your if you don't mind me ask, when did your grand or great grandparents move to the Caribbean? Do you have any stories that they have shared to you about how they kept their Hindu identity alive?
So my great great grandfather, the only knowledge that I have of him is that his name was Binda. That's all that I know.
That's his surname.
Yeah.
That's where it comes
so
from.
that's all that I know is that's what his name was. So one of the problems that happens more so for me, because I have had friends and family that went and they traced back their ancestry. So Guyana is actually pretty good for this in that they maintain very good records. So one of the projects that I have, and this is a little side thing, is that I want to see how far I can trace back. But when you talk about the stories, a lot of the stories that I have are from my father, because he grew up in an environment where, Hindu-ness was what they did. So where he grew up in the south of Trinidad, and every year his family would do a Bhagwat Puran Yagna. Wow. So 7 days. And a lot of the pundits that came, so his guru was a pundit that came from India. So they came over as part of that. He only spoke Hindi. But these yagnas that they used to do was, so 7 days, 3 times a day, they would do puja and they would read from the Bhagwat Puran. This is what my father grew up doing. And one of the things that he was also part of was raising cows. That was just the entire village life that they had in India is what continued when they came to Trinidad. So this was something that my father grew up with. And he would tell me stories about how like every year this was something that his father used to do. And then when my father got older, the family did it. And I went back to Trinidad 2 or 3 times and I participated in this. This was happening. And so 3 times a day we would go there, you would do puja, and then the pundit would read from the scriptures. When they came here, a lot of that continued as well. But some of the struggles that when you talk about trying to maintain that Hindu identity is the struggles that they had in going into school. Because when someone looks at me and they see that my name is Sean, the first question is, well, how did you get that name? And you call yourself a Hindu. I said, yeah. But when you look at what my parents had to go through, so both my mom and dad, in order to get into a school, you needed to speak English. And in order to get proper jobs, you needed to have an English name.
Wow.
So just by doing that, I would argue that our great-grandparents maybe had the foresight saying, in order to better your life, just do this.
Yeah.
Take this name, just do it, but we'll continue our practices at home. And that's exactly it. So my mom went to a Presbyterian school. Even me growing up here in Toronto, I went to a Catholic school because when my parents came here, they were looking at the public school system and the Catholic school system, and they're like, the Catholic school system has uniform. So that's what they were used to. So they just enrolled us there. One of the other struggles they had growing up there was trying to solidify the Hindu identity, because one of the things that we see playing out in modern times right now is that we don't have a voice in our community, whether it be on the political side, on the legal side, and any of that. So there was a coalescing of trying to fight for the rights of Hindus. So one thing that I learned in the last few years was the first cremation that was done in Trinidad was done in a garbage dump.
That story I heard. I watched your video and I was in tears. But yeah, please.
Yeah, and even I didn't know that. And then when I was researching it, I found the article in a textbook. And unfortunately, my father had already passed. So I went to my mom, like, did you know this? She's like, I did not know that. And this is why I think the study of history becomes important, because when you talk about the struggles of what Hindus had to endure, I think sometimes we take for granted all the things that we just have ready for us. We could get married under Hindu rights here in Canada. But you can imagine the struggle of trying to get something like that a Hindu marriage be legally recognized in the Caribbean was a struggle. So why? Yeah. So let me tell you a story. West Indians, when we get married, so whether you be Guyanese or from Trinidad, a white wedding dress and a black suit and tie for a male is very common. Why? because in the Caribbean islands, that was what you needed to do to be legally recognized for marriage. So what ended up happening is that Hindu families would have their Hindu ceremony, and then they would change after. They would wear the white wedding dress. They would have the suit. They would take photos. This is how we got married.
Yeah, we're legally married now according to how you want us to be.
Yeah,
That's
how you want us to be.
crazy. Yeah.
So that still continues here. So like a large part of the West Indian community weddings now would have the Hindu wedding done in full Hindu rites. You have a reception, and the bride and groom come with the white wedding dress. Now, for us, so when Sharmila and I got married, we said we're not having any of that because we're like, we kind of understood, how this played out, and we said we're not doing any of that. We just
So do you know when that changed? Because I did a little bit of research and I see that I think things started to change after the 1970s. I see something about the Black Power riots where temples were burnt down.
Yes.
And after that, there was something called as Jamaat al-Muslimin coup when radical Islamists took over. And then eventually it started improving. Can you shed some light during that time?
Sure. So I'll speak on the Trinidad Hindu experience. There was a sort of a unifying of the Hindu voice that happened in the 60s and the 70s. And you can imagine, both of you are from India, and you know how Hinduism, unfortunately, is largely divided on regional sort of practices, and there's different traditions that are done here and there. And sometimes, this leads to a lot of discord amongst the Hindus. So similar things started happening in Trinidad. And in order to solidify the Hindu vote, what ended up happening is that one leader emerged, Bades Sagan Maharaj, and he took all of these groups and he coalesced it into just one sort of Hindu identity.
Was that the Sanatan Dharma?
Right. So he was the founder of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. It was that organization, because they were able to kind of bring everyone under one umbrella, but still allow for a lot of regional variations, but one umbrella to call the Hindu Sanatani community. That is what finally gave Hindus power, because now they can use this as a voting bloc. Now they can use this to push for rights. So Hindu schools, Hindu rights for marriage, funeral rights, all of these things started happening. And it was that fight that I see kind of playing out here now is that I think here in Toronto, we're in the beginning stages of that, because we're still largely divided. I think among whether you're North Indian or South Indian or from the East or Gujarati or Punjabi or from wherever, or even us from the Caribbean. And I think we're at that sort of initial phases now, is that we're trying to figure out how is it that we sort of group all of this. And if we take the lessons from those in the Caribbean, it was that unifying of the Hindu voice that was needed. And that is how all of these things started to change.
Yeah. And something that I'm very proud of my being a Hindu identity and being a Sanatani is that our thought process is very different. Even just while you were speaking, what you mentioned was they formed a coalition so we could fight for our rights, and the fight happened democratically.
Absolutely.
I cannot think of a nation that is Hindu majority that is not democratic in nature, right? That's sort of deep in our culture. I was reading this article by one of an old gentleman from Trinidad who was kind of sharing these stories. I was looking into this topic, and he was talking about burning of temple incident. And he said once those temples were burnt, the very next day we rebuilt it. We used, cow dung. We used whatever we could to rebuild and put the walls together. And they had made a pact that you burn one temple, we will build 5. But they never said, you burn one temple, we will burn 5 churches. They did not tell you burn one temple, we'll burn 5 mosques. No, you burn one temple, we will rebuild it. The democratic nature and the non-violent ahimsa has always prevailed through us.
I think you raise a very interesting point. What I've noticed in my time looking up sort of like Hindu issues is that no matter what attacks Hindus have faced, the response has never been is that we're going to try to destroy another civilization.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that is something that needs to be told too, is that you have attacked us, okay? We're just going to rebuild.
Yeah.
Right? And that is something that I think we need to sort of share is that this has never been like a tit for tat. right?
Yeah.
Is it has never been that. What I also want to see too is that we don't take these things sitting down. And I think
Exactly.
this is sort of the voice that I try to bring to social media, because a lot of times we have this fear of just sort of expressing ourselves. Is that, and I think it just comes down to the very thing is that a proud Hindu always gets labeled as a Hindu nationalist.
Hindu nationalists or undebug. We were just talking about this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, right now, you see what's happening in India. There's Modi wave everywhere. Like, what I feel like is from last 10 years, I see like big things happening for India. And even right now, like, again, if I go 10 years back from now, I was not very religious. I was like one of those, I didn't really care. I never
Secular
really spoke.
kid.
Yes. No, don't, you are not supposed to be violent. If they are fighting, don't fight back, don't talk back. But now I realize you don't always have to be quiet.
Yeah.
You need to tell your stories. You need to pour your heart out, because I understand ahimsa or non-violence. This is something that is in our core, but you have to fight back for dharma. You have to. That's what our ancestors did. And fighting back is not demolishing buildings or burning down the streets, if you know what I mean. That is not fighting back. Fighting back can happen with non-violence too. Just telling your stories, just, talking who you are, how you feel. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be hinsa. But
And
yeah,
I think that is one lesson that we have lost throughout the years.
Yeah.
And if you kind of think back to, well, how did Hindus become so meek? Because that is a question that I always ask myself. When you look at a civilization that has lasted for thousands and thousands of years, when did we become these people that allow people to walk over you? And I think it just comes down to that when you look at the way that outsiders want you to be, a good Hindu is a quiet Hindu.
exactly.
And anyone who is not a quiet Hindu gets labeled as something else. When I first went onto YouTube, it was such an eye opener for me, because I started just making videos about just wanting to educate, because that's what I do, and that's where I got my start. And there was a lot of comments about, and Modi was, so the 2017 was when I started, and he was first elected in 2014. And I was like, Hindu nationalist. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I was born in Canada. Like, I was born and raised in, like, what ties are you talking about? But this is what gets, even today in 2025, it is Hindu nationalist. Any type of proud Hindu is a Hindu nationalist.
Because what has happened is, see, a lot of people think that the Indian civilization or India became independent from colonists in 1947. Sure. But a lot of people also think colonization started with Europe. No, it did not start with Europe. It started in Arabia.
That's right.
Arab invaded us in, I think, 700 CE or so after that. And since then, we someone wanted to come trade with us. We allowed them to trade with us. Someone did wrong to us. They fought back. But unfortunately, that history is shut down, right? And I think a good place for all of us to start, at least knowing, see, one of the things that I've learned is a religion is, I hope I am not going to offend anyone. Religious is a made up thing by people. That's what I believe, which is a group identify in a particular way and they call themselves, okay, I'm part of this. But eventually we all come from, the Supreme God. We believe it is the Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, the Trimurtis. So, there is no particular scripture. A lot of people come and ask me that, hey, what is the particular scripture that determines who is a Hindu? Well, there is not one, because Sanatana Dharma, the translation of it is ancient. We come from the past. We come from the ancient. There is educational text. Bhagavad Gita is educational text, right? So I went through a few challenges, it may be losing my dad. It may be coming and trying to battle out a new life, build a business here in Canada and do it all. And every time I got stuck, I would refer to the Gita. And right now we have ChatGPT. ChatGPT is such a good source, guys. What I usually do is I go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, I'm having this challenge. I'm having this question in my mind. Answer to me the way Krishna would answer to Arjuna while he was reciting the Bhagavad Gita. So I asked this question about, not fighting for our rights. And what I learned was, karmanye vadikaraste ma paleshu kadachana na karma pala heturbu mate sangastva karmini. That means you're put on this planet to perform your duty. If you do not perform your duty, you're basically failing why you were brought on this planet. So I asked my follow-up question, but how do I know what is my duty? right? Like, how do I know what is my calling? And then I asked that question to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT responded with another shloka that translates to, if you think you have a calling, if you know you have a calling, following that is your karma. Because you're getting a calling from some source.
Yeah.
That is your karma. And when that happened, I was like, good, I got my answers.
Let me give you a real life example of that. So my history of being Hindu starts with my family. So when my dad came here in 1972, my mom came up a few years after, and they got married here. And then I have an older brother and a younger sister. We were all born in the 80s. And my Hindu life really was because my parents were involved in a lot of the mandir activities that happened in the Toronto area. So we used to attend the Vishnu Mandir in Richmond Hill. So they were the first to get the large Hanumanji. And then from there, my father branched off and he founded the Devi Mandir, which is in Pickering, Ontario. So that was founded in 1989. The property was purchased in 1988. So we literally grew up that was a small farmhouse at the time. And then in 1995, 1996, construction happened. And then the Devi Mandir was built. So that's a structure that you see now if you ever go on Brock Road in Pickering.
Yep.
So my entire life was attending Mandir services growing up. I played tabla. I taught. My sister's a vocalist. So we sang. So she sang. And that is what we did. So that is how Hinduness got imbibed. But when you talk about your life's calling, it was, as I got older, I started getting more involved. They asked me to be part of the management of the Mandir. So I was the youngest director to be elected there. And that formed a large part of my 20s and just sort of doing all of this work. And then something happened in 2016 where there was an election. And my father, who was the founding president, and myself, we lost the election and we were kicked out. So a Mandir that my father founded was the founding president.
He was kicked out.
He was kicked out. We lost the election and we were kicked out. So 2016. And then when you talk about your life's calling, so you literally had to take a step back because my father sacrificed everything for that. So he took a second mortgage on our home to pay construction fees. Every living moment of free time was devoted to the temple. So you can imagine that when you lose an election like that, you're kind of like, well, what is my purpose now?
Yeah.
So for my father, he right away, he realizes that this is not the end. So started another community. So now we attend services at the J. Durga Hindu Society in Scarborough. That was just a branch off the Devi Mandir. We bought that premises in 2019, that group, and that's where we are now. So restarting. So when I talk about my father's life purpose was to build community, was to create a sense of Hindu identity in the next generation. But now I come to myself and I think about your question, and it's like, so what is my life's calling? 2016, when we lost the election, I had to kind of rethink, what am I going to do? Because I really thought at the time is that I was getting ready to sort of do more of this sort of Mandir management and just be sort of in that role. And then the students that I used to teach in the classes that I taught, the Bal Vikas classes, they were all in high school at the time. They're like, why don't you do more with your lessons? And I said, what do you mean do more? They're like, why don't you do a website? And I said, a website? I'm like, what? It's just lessons on a website. I decided to make YouTube videos. And then
that's how it started.
That's how it started.
Oh, wow. That was your calling.
And so funny enough now, so 2016 was when I made a decision, okay, let me start working on it. I posted my first video in 2017, posted consistently all the way up into 2018 until my son was born. And then life just changed because it was so hard to maintain that and my job and then my volunteer duties at the temple. And then my father passed away in 2023. And then I realized, well, what is your purpose of life? It was these huge questions that just come to you. It's like, what is my calling? And then then it clicked. Then I'm like, I need to go back to this. And now when I realize it, I'm like, this is I think, what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
Not to be this sort of like YouTube personality, but if I can reach out to more people with the message that we have a lot of work to do, we have a lot of understanding to do. There's a lot more to like do for the Hindu community that is not just relegated to like maintaining a mandir.
Yeah.
You find your life's calling.
Yeah, 100%. And you do not necessarily need to have a specific calling. Like temples are being vandalized and you're sitting home. When was the last time? And when I tell you, I'm speaking to the typical Hindu that is sitting home and complaining about Rath Yatra. Did you even feel like you wanted to at least write an email to your local MP's office and ask, what are you guys doing about it? Right? We get vandalized all the time. You do not necessarily need to. And when that happened, I had this other question. I again went back to ChatGPT and I said, hey, I feel like this is my calling, but I do not know if I'm willing to do that. And it said another thing, which is called as atah chetvam imam dharmam sangramam na karisyasi tata swadharmam kirtyancham hitvam papam avapsyasi. That means if you know your calling and you're not following it, that means you're doing adharma.
Right.
That is why even after the Mahabharat, some of the folks who had to go through the toughest time, they were not Duryodhana or they were not Shakuni, because they were supposed to do adharma. It was Bhishma, it was Karna, it was Dronacharya, because they knew what is right, yet they did not choose to follow the path.
You're absolutely right. And in my own journey, there was a lot of things that sort of happened that was constantly sort of like pushing me away from what I thought I had to do. And when you say those things, it's absolutely right. And everything that sort of transpired in my entire life has always brought me back to this. And in modern day times, yes, making a podcast, making a video, posting it on social media. But those are just the mechanisms that bring about something greater, is that you are trying to get more and more people to understand like that being Hindu is something special. It is something that I really do think is universal. But we are so stuck in all the like layers that exist on it of how people have made Hindus to seem, how to make Hindus feel, that we just want to like let go of it. But maybe if we can kind of peel away all of that negativity, find that source from within and get the message out there, then that is all that I hope for.
I have a question here. I want to go back to the topic where you mentioned, in your 20s, you were playing tabla, teaching kids. However, I think I was watching one of your videos, correct me if I'm wrong, where you mentioned while you were in high school, you had to hide your Hindu identity, right? However, still you were very close to your rituals, religion, all that good stuff. So why you felt the need to hide who you are? Like
that is an excellent question. So let me give a little bit of background. Because my parents enrolled me in Catholic school, I knew from a very young age that I was different. Because in our home, we had pictures of Durga, of Shiva, of Ram, of all of our Hindu deities hanging on our wall.
Yeah.
And I knew that that's not what my friends had. So when I went to school, it was Catholic school that I went to. And Catholic elementary school system in Ontario, you learn from the Bible. You go to mass, you do all of these things.
Oh.
So yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that's the environment that I grew up in.
Okay.
So I knew that I was different. And I didn't want to lose my friends, because somehow, like psychologically, I probably felt that if they knew that I was Hindu, that they wouldn't want to be my friends anymore. So what that meant is that I had a very like brick wall that I mentally made, is that my friends will not know who I am, but when I come home, I am Hindu. And I never shied away from being Hindu. So like I never told my mom and dad that, no, we're not going to the temple, that I'm embarrassed. I would do everything. I learned to play like the dholak and music. But when it came to this sort of school identity with your Canadian friends that are either your typical sort of white Canadian friends, I grew up with a lot of Italians and Polish and all of that. I never wanted them to know. So come to high school now, I'm in a Catholic high school, and in grade 11, we do world religions. That's sort of what happens throughout the entire high school curriculum. It's an option, and a lot of people choose to do it. So I was doing world religions. It just so happened around that time is the Toronto Star was doing, they were trying to find teenagers that were growing up that were in high school that maintain their religion. And somehow my name got circulated there and a reporter called me.
Oh, wow.
So I said, do you want to do this interview? Sure. Because I was never really afraid. I was like, sure, because I am Hindu. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I go to Catholic school. My friends don't know, but I am Hindu. It's grade 11. Now everyone's doing world religions. One of the assignments is now go to the newspaper and find any article about religion. These two things just happen to align. They published the article right when the assignment was for students to go in. And my friends found out. So they come now, and we used to play cards in the morning time. So in the morning time early, we're playing cards and everyone starts dropping hints, like 2 or 3 friends about Hindu this and Hindu that. And I'm just playing cards. I'm like not thinking them. And then they're like, why didn't you tell us? And like my heart dropped. It's like if my heart was like, I couldn't even speak. They're like, why didn't you tell us? I'm like, tell you what? That you're Hindu. Then I'm like, and I didn't know how to answer. And then I'm like, how do you know? And then like, your name's in the newspaper. And then they show it to me and I'm like, and then their next words, and this is where I realized how dumb I was. They're like, it makes so much sense. They're like, it makes so much sense. I'm like, why do you say that? Because they're like, you would never be free on the weekends. You would always be busy on the weekends.
Yeah.
You never let us inside. I remember playing with my friends on my street and they wanted to come inside my house. I'm like, no, you can't come inside my house. Because mentally, like I was scared. And it was just because I think my parents had enrolled me in Catholic school that I felt that they couldn't know about that, because then maybe I would get kicked out of school. Maybe they would tease me. Maybe I wouldn't have any friends. So that is sort of where that
did
wall.
Because one of the things is, see, you were a kid growing up, and if you were thinking that, okay, if people would know I'm a Hindu, maybe I would be in trouble. If a kid that is growing up is getting that thought, there must be some root causes to what creates that thought. Was there any incident or situation that you would have seen or an experience that made you feel that way? I ask this not for you, but for many, many other kids growing up right now.
My brother and myself were the only Indian kids in our school growing up. So we would frequently get name called. And it was something that I never really thought much of. And even my brother, who's just a year older than me, we never really thought much of it. And I remember this one incident where we were sitting in our basement and we were just talking. We were probably like 8 or 9 years old. And my mom overheard. And she's like, the kids said what? And they called us a name. I'm not going to repeat it. We're like, this is what the kids said. And we didn't really think anything of it. She's like, no. She went to the school the next day to talk to the principal. And that's what made me realize is that, yes, we are different. And those names that people are calling you, it makes you not want to sort of project that identity. Is that you just want to fit in. And I mean, this is a story that any immigrant child, generally that grew up in the 80s and the 90s, they went through it because you were such a small minority at the time. You really didn't want to feel different from those around you. But internally, I knew we were different, but I didn't have the words to sort of express that. And I think one of the things that I want growing up for my kids is to know that you can be both Canadian and Hindu at the same time. Those two things don't need to be separate. Whereas I think back then, every child felt it to some extent.
Yeah. What made you, again, I know I'm going a little bit deeper. So now you said, despite of all of this, you did not just walk out of being a Hindu, right? You still practiced everything that you wanted to practice, etc. As a kid growing up. So what was the influence? I'm sure it's your dad, but if you can throw more light on it, that made you want to continue doing what you were supposed to do or what you were taught to do?
So I think every child growing up needs some sort of entry into Hinduism. And for me, it was music.
Okay.
So music for me was something that spoke to me. So I grew up playing dholak. When I was in high school, I started to learn tabla. And my entry into Hindustani classical music gave me something deeper. And it was sort of that journey there. So internally, that's what changed for me. But externally, the ability to play these instruments in public helped to solidify this is Indian music. This is Hindustani music. This is who I want to be because this is pretty cool. And I think that was the start of it. And I say this now to members of my own West Indian community, because a lot of Caribbean Hindus, this is their entry into Hinduism, is through music. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of it stops right there. And deeper aspects of Hinduism get lost. So that internal search for spirituality, of connecting with the divine, usually gets lost. And even on the advocacy side, they don't have the voice to express that.
Yep.
Whereas for me, as I got older, that music was the entry point to develop bhakti, that love, that devotion. And then as I got older, then all of these other aspects started to sort of solidify again.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of West Indians, music is the entry, but then it stops, which is what I have a problem with.
Yeah, yeah. And that was such a profound thing that you said, which is music, which is education. Musical education led you to religion, right? Another way to see about it is, if you actually embrace religion, that will open the door for education. Because Carnatic music, the arts, right? Ayurveda, medicine, astronomy, astrology, all of this is education, deep sciences. We had Pushpak Viman. There is a podcast that I was watching in which I heard that one of the reason we have gopurams in temples that go long back is because the open spots in the gopurams, as the sun is rising or setting, you could see sun through one of those boxes, right? If you would see like in the top box, it's like around 1 p.m., right? As it is setting, it's like 6 p.m. You would see it in the bottom box, right? So it's very divine, and it's, if we start going deep, I still feel that I know for a fact that all our scriptures were burnt down in Nalanda University by, I think, Khilji, one of the Khilji brothers burnt it down, but that had so many artifacts that we've lost. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are, like, our Hindu community is ignorant right now, because they do not know a thing about why certain things are done. And even as myself, I was reciting some quotes right now. The reason I know those quotes is because I used to do the Bhagavad Gita competition when I was growing up in school.
Right, yes.
So I knew all these things, but I did not know what it meant.
Yeah.
But right now, as I'm growing up, I'm like, holy crap, it makes so much sense. Right?
Yeah. So I think, one of the pillars that I stand on is education. And that's where I got my start. And it was something that was kind of thrust on me in 2011, 2012, is that, so the Devi Mandir where we were going, they needed a teacher because they just needed someone to teach. I said, okay, well, I'm into like Hindu things. Let me take a stab at it. And it just opened up so many doors to me. Like, education is, I think, one of the biggest things. I would say now, because the landscape has changed, there is so much information on the internet right now. Whereas, like, with the rise of the internet, so much information. Even with the rise of information now, still a lot of this is still getting lost on individuals. So what is it more now is that where is it? Because you can't say that we don't have enough knowledge. Like, knowledge is out there. There are many gurus that are on the internet. Yeah. There's many scriptures and everything is there. But when you talk about those not wanting to embrace Hindu identity, it's not just education. There's something deeper that we have to be able to sort of unpack.
Yeah, I think like, if you look at other groups, there is massive funding that happens towards educating, those who do not know about their particular group, or those who are not embracing their particular group. So much funding goes out from Qatar, from the Arab, to make sure that a lot of their religious places gets open up, and same to many other places. But there is no such thing called as a conversion practice to be a Hindu, right? You cannot convert to be a Hindu. There, at least in scriptures, there is no such things that at least I've heard that we could find. So I feel that the need to influence has never been seen, because we have just grown up with an identity and a thought process that everyone has the liberty to follow what they would want to follow. I do not feel a necessity to push someone to learn about something else. But that is mistaken. You do not have to push in order to educate. Education is not push, right? Yeah. So that's why I respect a lot of YouTubers like you who are taking your time out.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Honestly, while growing up, I remember I had a lot of, because I'm from Punjab, right? I had a few Sikh friends. I grew up in Sikh community. I would go to Gurudwara with them a lot, every now and then. And again, growing up, my family they were not very religious. I would maybe go to temple once in a while. So I feel like this starts from a very, very young age. And I have a question for you here, because I just met your two beautiful little boys, and I know there are a lot of young Indian parents who maybe want their kids to have those Hindu values. They maybe want their kids to embrace that Hindu religion, but they're maybe lost. They don't know how to start. How are you raising your kids? Like,
Wow,
what do you think
great
some of the
question.
things young parents should do so that we are not losing our culture here in the West?
Yeah. That's probably like a whole series of episodes there, because it's something that I have like, I understood it when I didn't have kids. And when you do have kids, it kind of like really just hits you in the
Yeah.
face. So the problem is two parts. And I've experienced this in my time because I still teach right now. So parents themselves don't know. And I think that is the struggle. So people of my generation, so, born in the 80s and the 90s, like, we have kids now, right? They themselves, they may have grown up in a Hindu environment, but a lot of that knowledge still isn't quite there. So like, part of what I do in teaching is you try to teach the younger generation, but you're also trying to teach parents as well.
Exactly.
So when you talk about what is it that parents need to do and how is it that you get started, the first thing that has to happen in your life is, number one, there needs to be some sort of awakening or a realization that you are who you are. You made the comment about our last names, that we are who we are because someone before us felt that it was important to pass it on.
Yeah.
If you yourselves don't have that inner realization, nothing's going to happen.
Very true.
So you can try to talk until you're blue in the face. And I've done this. My father used to do it as well. He used to tell parents, bring your kids to the temple. And a lot of them will be like, yeah, well, they got school, they got this. If parents can't come to that, then everything else from that is not going to flow. But let's assume that parents now have some sort of inner awakening. And I've seen it within my own sort of circle of friends, because one of the things back in 2022, 2023, when I wanted to come back to it, I realized that everyone around me was not doing anything. Is that they were growing up, but I'm like, where is everyone that I grew up with? So what I started doing is we started kind of reaching out to those that we grew up with their own kids. I'm like, okay, like, this is what we need to start doing now. So everyone now is now coming to that realization. So let's assume now that people have come to that realization that, okay, we need to do something. First thing that every Hindu should do is have some type of daily spiritual practice at home.
Absolutely.
If you're not lighting a diya at a minimum, don't call yourself a Hindu. That is, I would say that point blank.
Yeah.
And that is something that I also had to come to. So I grew up going into where my dad and where my mom and dad had our little altar room. But my own like spiritual practice probably didn't solidify until I got much older. So if you don't start those routines, like, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think parents themselves don't do it because they don't make the time for it. Listen, when you got two kids that you're struggling to like get out of the door, and if you have more than, even if you have one, how do you incorporate all of that? Yeah. And it just comes down to it. Like, there's so many podcasts about let's reset your life. Let's like change your habits. Let's do all these things, all of these life hacks and all of this. So you got to life hack spirituality as well.
Yeah.
Like, you have to make it part of something that you want to do.
Absolutely.
And then once you do that, so just do something basic every day. Do that. The next step is a community identity. And I think that's where the struggle is now for people that maybe have newly immigrated, and even those that have settled here for a long time. What you lose when you come to a Western society is that sense of community. And I think when immigrants came to the country and they established mandirs, fellow immigrants formed their own community because they found people that were like them. But if you're born in Canada and you're born in the USA or wherever, your community is not necessarily the people that go to temple. Your community is your high school friends, your university friends. Your community is like everyone else. So how do you create that sense of identity? And I think this is something that we don't actively think about, because if you grew up in India, you grew up in Trinidad, or you grew up in these places where there's more of a Hindu population, group identity is just naturally implicit to that society. You come to Canada now and you're kind of like, there's so many pressures because this is a whole other thing too. But when you look at a lot of the comments being made about immigrants now in Canada, there is this pressure now to assimilate, that you have to assimilate to Canadian identity. How do you balance these two things now? And I think that is where, we need to be able to articulate. And I think how I like to look at it is that when we grew up here, we bridged both worlds.
Yeah.
I gave the example, I can't remember where.
Catholic
is that
school.
On Halloween last year, it was the same day as Diwali.
Yeah.
Right? So for a Canadian kid growing up that doesn't celebrate Diwali, it becomes a non-issue. We're just going to go dress up. But your kids are Hindu. So as a parent, what do you do? And a lot of it, there's those on one side would be like, well, we're not doing Halloween. But now, okay, well, you're in Canada too, and your kids are seeing like other people dressing up in costumes. So, what we ended up doing within our family is that we had a conversation about it. The kids said, they want to go out. We're like, okay, we're going to do all our pujas and stuff at home. We're going to light our diyas everywhere. Then after, we'll take you guys out. Yeah. So it's all of these sort of things that sort of come up naturally that I think when you want to talk to parents about what they need to do, these simple things is that first you have to have some type of awakening. Yeah. You need to realize that something clicks in your head is that if you don't do something right now, you're losing that next generation. And then the second thing is that daily practice is key. And that's where a lot of parents don't do it.
Yeah, I love that you spoke about the pressure to assimilate, etc. I had another guest last week, and something that he said is a basic misconception people have is not every brown person is an Indian Hindu. That means, if they look at all brown people, the far right conservatives I'm talking about, anything far is never good. Far right, far left, anything far is never good, right? So that's why, it's a good idea not to put yourself and tag yourself as one side, right? Stick by your values. So if you look at it, what are Hindu values and what are Canadian values? Liberty, Canadian value. It's also Hindu value because the reason why some people be like, oh, you worship cow, you worship tree, you worship this, you worship that. Yeah, because we have the freedom to worship whatever we want to. We have the freedom to think. We have the freedom to get into our inner consciousness, reason, ask questions. Our tradition has always been questions, right? Parvati goes to Shiva and asks a bunch of questions. It becomes the Shiva Puran.
That's right.
Arjuna, he goes through all of the challenges in life. He was not having a good childhood. He took it. He waited. Pandavas waited to go back to their family. They went back to their family and they realized no one liked them. They took it and they kept quiet. They became king. They were snatched away. They were okay because it was family. They went through all the hardships and they were tried to be killed. They took it. They changed their identity. And then they tried to exploit their wife. And that's when they decided to fight a war. After all these things, Arjuna still had a question. Why am I fighting my own family? And that's when he asked all these questions. And those questions became the Bhagavad Gita. So we are all about reasoning, questioning, and having the freedom to follow our values. Liberty, Canadian value, Hindu value. Another value is freedom, equality, same values. So if there are folks watching this and they're like, okay, you're here to take over. Guys, Hindus have never taken over anything.
Right.
You go back to history, you will never find a Hindu take over another piece of land. We just add value.
Yep.
That's it.
When you had asked me this question, I think yesterday about Hindu values, my immediately thought went to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And one of the things that a lot of people were saying was that, he was someone that valued debate and questioning and all of that. And one of the problems that I see in largely Western society right now is that we have lost the ability to debate. And you do have these two extremes on both sides, the far right and you have the far left. And it is not getting any easier. It's actually getting worse. And one of the things that I came to is that we need a middle path. And who is advocating for that middle path where you are looking at debate? And when you talk about Hindu values, the ability to question and not have someone attack you for the mere act of questioning is something that has been lost on our society. And I think when we look at the two extremes of those, because there are those on the far right that are willing to resort to violence, and we've now seen it on the far left as well, willing to resort to violence. The middle path is that you have to be able to question anything, question it, and be able to arrive at truth.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that, because now we're saying is that truth is now subjective. So your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and my truth is more right than your truth. And I think that's the problem, that we're now going down this spiral.
Yeah. Charlie Kirk's murder broke me. You know, I cried when my dad passed away in 2021, and I cried when Charlie Kirk passed away, because it was not right. It's never right to assassinate someone because you do not believe in their values. So, yeah, I mean, again, it can be another separate topic. Do not want to get there.
I mean, honestly, I felt the same because, people on the internet, everybody was like, oh, he's spilling hate. He deserves it. He deserves to die. But that man was really, all he was doing was going to the college campuses, talking to people, and just having an honest debate, exchange of values. Like, he didn't deserve to die just because he had different views than yours. So, yeah.
And, a lot of that has filtered into a lot of the debate around public expressions of Hindu identity as well, is that we're not willing to sit and talk. And when I say we are not willing, those on the far right, when they see someone like me just expressing myself, one of the common things that I get is that, well, you guys don't belong here. And I'm like, have you ever thought to sit down and talk to someone about it? And I receive frequent attacks from those on the far right as well as the far left about these things. And I'm like, all you guys are doing is you're living in your echo chamber and you're just regurgitating everything amongst the people that like what you have to say. And you're not really trying to figure out what is the commonality between both groups.
Yeah. And that is when this happens, is when there are some groups which is neither far left nor far right. They're a group with agendas. They take advantage. That's why I see a lot of Khalistanis attacking and vandalizing Hindu temples, right? I don't think they're either far right or far left. They're agenda driven. What was your response or your reaction to all of these attacks and vandalisms on temples, and old people were beaten up, and what's your thought after you heard them?
So the Khalistan issue is something that growing up, I didn't really know much about it. And I think I made a reel on this. Is my first exposure to this was when I was younger. My sister was learning dance from someone whose family had passed away on the Air India bombing. So that was sort of the only thing that I heard about it. Then growing up, I didn't hear much about it. I posted a video back in 2018 or so. It was about Raksha Bandhan, and it was with Superwoman and Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, we actually saw that video.
Mr. Jagmeet Singh said it is sexist.
Yeah. So I just did a response, and a whole bunch of comments started flooding there. And I was still fresh on YouTube, and I didn't know what to make of this. I ended up blocking all comments because I wasn't used to this level of hate, because all I said is that don't call it this, because and that's when a few people messaged me afterwards and they were explaining about Khalistan, and I'm like it really, and that sent me down a rabbit hole then. Now fast forward now, and now when I came back to it, a lot of these things started happening because I started seeing more reports about the vandalism in mandirs. And then November 2024, we are exiting the mandir that we attend, and I get a video forward of this is happening now at Hindu Sabha in Brampton. Oh, my jaw dropped. I was in complete shock. And I sat in the car and I turned to Sharm and I said, watch this. And she's like, where's this from? I said, Hindu Sabha right now. She's like, right now? I said, yeah, this just happened. And our next thought was is this going to come here? Is this going to come to all the mandirs? And then that sort of just spurred on a whole bunch of stuff. I made videos about it. It went viral. And the one thing that really bothered me about this was the lack of response from the politicians. And this then exposed where the Hindu community was failing in the Greater Toronto area, largely the Canadian society. where our shortcomings were, because for so long we lived with this false sense of that we are doing such good things for the community, that we are contributing, we're paying taxes, we're doing this. But when trouble hit us, when the manders were being vandalized, it exposed that we didn't really have anything and we didn't have any power anywhere. And what really bothered me was that there were still members of our community, of the Hindu community, saying is that everything's fine.
Exactly.
Everything's
and another
fine.
thing is, when those temples were vandalized, see, again, what you mentioned, right? If somebody burns one temple, we don't go out burn 5 churches or 5 mosques. Like, nobody took stand, and like, it was crazy. It felt, I was really shattered, and exactly what you mentioned, right? That is it going to come here as well? I remember when that happened, we were supposed to go to, I think it was some festival
Temple,
or something. We were supposed to go to temple. I'm like, Karthi, now I'm even scared to go to this temple. What if it just happens here while we are there, right? Things are just getting unpredictable day by day.
And then the other thing that happened with that is that it made me realize how the sort of this attitude of Hindus is that, oh, this is not our problem. And I think for a lot of us from the West Indian community, we had that as well, is that, oh, this is like an Indian temple problem. Little did they know that Hindu Sabha is steps away from a largely Guyanese Hindu community, the Bhavani Shankar Mandir. It's literally steps away. And that's when people started realizing they are not just about attacking whatever their message is. This is a Hindu problem. We need a Hindu response to it. And what I can say happened from that is that it really woke up a lot of people within the community. And it's good to see that happening. The question, though, is that is it going to be a sustained response? Because it's one thing to react in the moment. The question is, can you build enough systems in place that can have that longevity that you need to start advocating properly for Hindus?
Yeah. What I did was I called up my local MP and I asked them, what are you doing about this? And they responded, we're doing everything we can about it. But what you said is right, is we don't ask enough questions. We do not ask enough reasons. Oh, I'm taking care of my career. I'm taking care of my family. I'm taking care of my life. I'm good. If there is trouble there, I don't want to go there. That's what I was always taught growing up. My mom would always say, hey, those kids are fighting. Don't go to them. Don't play with the other kids. Right? And that eventually sort of became my mindset. Okay, there is a conflict there. Let me stay away from conflict. Why do I need it? Now, the challenge is, and a lot of people tell me, hey, why do you talk about controversial things? Why do you think about, talk about conflicts? Well, what if we are part of the conflict? What if what happens is when you watch something wrong that's happening and you remain a spectator, there are high chances that you would experience that yourself.
It's coming for us. If we stay quiet, it's going to happen to us as well. Not maybe us, our future generation, our kids, our grandkids.
So we are not here advocating go fight. What do I mean by that? Go learn politics. Like learn your rights. Learn what is written in Constitution. Most people in Canada do not even know that there are 2 parts to Constitution in Canada. They do not know that. Most people do not know their rights. And that is why. Why is it that, why is mass immigration happening? It's because the leadership and, the political group, they were left free. They were left free to make immigration policies the way they wanted and, get a huge influx of literally everyone from the entire world. And they open it up. Nobody questioned. Like, yeah, you can go and protest on the street, but if you do not know what is written in Constitution, if you do not know how many ridings are there in Canadian Parliament, if you do not know the last name or first name of your local MP, there is no change you can create. And corrupt leaders will continue to do what they want to do, like Jagmeet Singh. He wanted his pension. He waited for it. He got his pension. Right now, he's nowhere to be seen. Until then, he kept appeasing. He himself condemned the attacks in a very weird way. He said, attack on no religious groups is permitted. Let's be calm.
It was very diplomatic answer.
Yeah.
Very,
like,
very
really, bro? But on the other end, you're going and attending the, speeches and the seminars where they're literally propagating hate.
Yeah.
They're literally calling killing of Prime Minister of one of Canada's ally. Yeah. And he's there.
So one of the things that I also realized in this whole affair is that many Hindus don't know how to find their voice.
Yep.
because they've always lived in an environment where they never wanted to speak up. And one of the most common messages that I receive over social media is just thank you for saying this because I didn't know how to say it, or thank you for expressing what I've been feeling, but I just didn't know how to express it. So the question is, and I'll ask you this now, is that how do Hindus find their voice? Because it's something that when I think about my kids growing up, I want them to have a voice, you know, and it is something that we actively have to work towards, is finding your voice. Finding your voice means that you have to be comfortable with who you are to begin with.
I think, I'll answer from my side
of course,
and you can go ahead and add anything as well. I think we need to really realize the power that we have and the richness of the tradition and the culture that is really there. Most of us are unaware, uninformed, and uneducated about the values that come into, our learnings. For example, like going through grief, you spoke a little bit about it. When I lost my dad, I could not go to India to do his final rituals, and it broke me apart. It completely, absolutely broke me. And when that happened, that's when I started looking into, okay, who can give me answers? And I started finding Sadhguru's videos, and he speaks about death. He speaks about 3 layers of your body, right? Like your physical body, your mental body, and then your spiritual body. How your soul exits your body, and then it's confused where it's going. And like you made a video about it as well. So I don't want to explain that. But when I started learning about it, I'm like, this makes sense. So I went back to India the next year and did the final rituals. And when I did that, Sean, I was at peace. That is when I realized that final rituals is not really or not necessarily to the person who's passed away. It is for me to be able to overcome my grief. So that opened up a whole new door of possibilities of me understanding. If I just go back to my scriptures, if I just go back to our history, if I just go back and learn the enormous wisdom that is there, even if I could tap into a little bit of it, how better off could my life be? Right? So I know it's a long answer, but long story short, I really think everyone should get exposed to Ramayana, Mahabharat, and the Gita. They need to know the stories. Kids need to know these stories. Everyone needs to know these stories. Not because, Lord Rama was an enormous god. Like in our Sanatani Dharma, we say, Aham Brahmasmi. That means there is an ansha of God in each one of us. And when you figure out the ability to not let kama, krodha, mada, lobha, moha, matsara, these things entangle you. It's not giving up. It's when you do not let them entangle you and you're able to perform your dharma despite of anything that is coming up, you would live a pure life as purely as a god would have lived. So when you go back and read the history of Rama, Lord Rama or Lord Krishna, how they were able to overcome challenges. Rama, he went through a lot. Like, he was banished to a forest. He lived there with dharma. His wife was taken away, and then he went for a battle, defeated the evil, came back. Krishna, how he was born and brought up in a prison, and he started preserving dharma. He went and saved a family that was going through a lot and gave the knowledge of Gita. When we learn all of that, what happens is we understand that what is the right way to live. When we understand the right way to live, when we understand what is Gita and what is written in Gita, and take basic decisions in my life based on the very principles, the quality of our life becomes enormous. And that is where I stand, which is, I know a lot of people think that Lord Rama was all about peace. Yes, he was about peace, but the whole thing about Ramayana was defeating Ravan, was fighting battle, right? So I know Gandhi, preached non-violence, and he spoke a lot about Ram. Let's follow the person Gandhi followed, not just Gandhi, which is Ram, right? So I feel Mahavatar Narasimha movie that came out, that's a phenomenal asset. I'm extremely excited to watch all the Dashavatars, and I know that when I would have kids and when my kids would grow up, they would watch these movies as cartoons, right? So I feel it should begin in the childhood, and I think we should empower ourselves with the richness of what is there behind us. When we know that, when you have the knowledge of Gita, or at least when you can resort to Gita, I think you'll end up taking good decisions. What do you think?
That's a beautiful answer. Honestly, I have a very simple take on this. I feel like for kids, parents are their first teacher. Home is their first school. I feel like in our South Asian community, we are told not to talk back, of course, not to answer a lot of questions, respect elders, respect everyone, be secular. I mean, of course, definitely. While growing up here, especially since I started living alone in Canada, I realized that some of the values, of course, that I was born and raised into, I used to be very quiet. Like, I mean, I have worked with people who would walk all over me because while growing up, I was told not to talk back. It's okay, respect everyone, no matter their age and all that good stuff. But I feel like we need to change the narrative that respect those who respect you. Yes, in our Hinduism, we're taught, of course, you should be secular, respect all the religions, everyone. Yes, we should, because this is what our Hinduism teaches us. But also we need to teach our kids, if somebody questions your identity, if somebody questions your religion, you're allowed to talk back. You're allowed to answer them. Hey, why did you say that? Where are you learning this from? Like, why are you questioning who I am? Why are you questioning my religion without knowing anything about it? So I think we need to teach our kids it's okay to answer questions and talk back. And, you need to walk with the sense of dignity, with your chin up and, be who you are. I think that's very important.
One of the things that I would say in the last 5 years or so, from the passing of my father to even coming into my own voice and realizing like the things that I need to do right now is conversations need to happen more and more. And I think one of the areas where the Hindu community has failed is the lack of conversations amongst individuals, amongst families about just trying to like understand each other. Yeah. And a lot of it, I think we were struggling so much, like immigrant families, they come here and they just struggle to make ends meet. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine is that a lot of the times you don't even think about these things because you're just trying to figure out like, about my job and whether you have a roof over your head. Now we're coming to a point where I think the Hindu community now has realized, okay, those basic needs are now met. How is it that we elevate to the next level? And I think we're at the beginning stages. So finding your Hindu voice is going to come from having conversations with those amongst your family is to find out, well, why is it that you feel embarrassed that Hindus are practicing their faith openly in the public? And they might give you a whole bunch of answers. And then the next step is that, well, how is it that we take all of this and now we coalesce it into some type of voice where now we can find our place in society to find those that can advocate for us. And I think we're just at that stage. And I never thought that I would find myself in the position that I'm in right now. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I certainly think it's an interesting time.
Yeah. Also, I feel like we lack unity. We lack unity big time, just like you mentioned earlier, right? When they demolished that particular temple, maybe people from, maybe Trinidadian Hindus thought, okay, this is not a problem. West Indies Hindus thought it's not their problem. But people who are coming towards us to demolish our temples, they don't know which temple belongs to which community. For them, it's a temple, it's a place of worship that doesn't belong to their religion and it should not stay there, it doesn't belong there. So I think we lack unity. We need to really come together. And what do you think? What are some of the things we can do to unite all the Hindus? Doesn't matter, which country they come from. At the end of the day, our roots are from Sanatana Dharma and we need to, stick together.
So this is a question that I get asked a lot. Yeah. Because in Toronto, the West Indian Hindu community, outside of a few of the larger mandars, tend to stick to themselves. And it is something that I've struggled with. And my answer is to kind of look back at history again, is that when Hindus left India and as part of indentureship, and then they came to the West Indies, they were forced, not through their own choosing, but they were forced because of the environment that they were in to come together. They didn't have a choice because what you saw was there were you who came from wherever you were, and then there were those that were there. So you had the colonial powers, and then you had the African slaves. By that environment, they were forced to coalesce. In Canada now, when you look at it, I think we're not at the stage yet where we will probably find a unified voice in my lifetime, because we are still too tied to these regional identities that we're a part of. But if you look at generations to come now, maybe we are coming close to something of what a North American Hindu identity is? These are questions that I think we're not going to find answers to. We're starting to kind of formulate what that is, but 2 or 3 generations from now, and if our great-grandchildren or whoever are still living in Canada, are they going to have the same sort of baggage, if you want to call it that, of being tied to certain regional identities? Or is it going to be something more global? And one of the ideas that I've circulated is that, is there such thing as a global Hindu identity? Because if you look at ISKCON and you look at all of these sort of like modern day Hindu movements, they're attracting people that are non-Indian. You go to Africa and ISKCON has made a huge sort of move into there as well. There's a lot of African swamis that are doing pujas, that are doing...
Oh my God. I've seen some guru
You've
pujas
seen it.
they do. I was like blown away.
Oh, wow.
So now tell me now, are we moving towards a somewhat of a global Hindu identity? It's an interesting question. That being said, because Sanatan Dharma emerged out of Bharat, you're never going to divorce it from there, right? So it is still going to have the underpinnings of there. But my hope is that we move towards more of what Sanatan Dharma is, right? Is universal. And I think that's where I hope this eventually comes, so that when we sit together is that we look at each other as that we're all Hindu, right?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true because, one of the, I don't know if you've heard of Nilesh Oak. So Ranveer Allahabadia has done a lot of podcasts with him. So he has actually broken down to say how Sri Lanka is not the Lanka they speak about in Ramayana. And they say it's probably somewhere in Africa. Like if you go to Peru, there is this huge mountain that has the Trishul on it. And that was described in Ramayana, the original Valmiki Ramayana, long time ago. So before the tectonic plates moved away and, India or Bharat is the way it is right now, there were still, the traces of Ramayana that you can go back to. So you were absolutely right. It does not have to stick to Bharat. Although I feel that Bharat plays a significant role in continuing to empower, everyone across. One of the reason I respect Modi is that he does not really care about being called as a nationalist, right? Because, they still inaugurated the Ram Mandir. That was a big victory because the story of Ram Mandir coming back was not the story that the left shows that we oppressed someone and brought the Mandir back. No, it was reviving our identity of what we were and what we were supposed to be, and finally getting the courage to tell that, hey, if you do something wrong to me, I won't just accept and sit quiet. I'm going to fight back in a democratic way, using my constitution in the court of law. In the law of court, and I'm going to fight it out. So that's why Ram Mandir is, and to those folks telling, oh, but why is it necessary? Why is it necessary for you to revive your temple back? Bro, if your house was burnt down or broken down,
wouldn't you revive it back?
Wouldn't you want to go revive it back?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That, I remember watching, because it was, when it was happening in India, it was almost like 2 or 3 in the morning here. So I remember watching it, and it really was a surreal moment to see the prime minister of a country doing puja the same way that I'm used to doing puja. It was not something that I'd ever witnessed before. And I think that moment really kind of hit it home for a lot of Indians that are outside of India, a lot of Hindus that are outside of India, to kind of see that, yes, it's possible for a civilization to kind of reawaken. It's possible for a civilization to reclaim what is theirs, and if you look at it, they went through the court system. Something that they knew to be true still had to go through the court system for so long for it to finally be awarded. I know for many of us from the West Indian community, that moment was very, very powerful, because the Ramayana for us was one of the things we just listened to growing up. It was just listened. It was sang. It was something that to our core was who we are. So to see a mandir being constructed for that version of Sri Ram who was a child, just to see that was so powerful. There's another aspect of this whole conversation that I would like to just address here, because it's something that people rarely speak about. So a lot of the West Indian spaces on social media are very secular, very sort of let's not promote a Hindu identity. Let's not talk about it. And that is one thing that I try to push back against. Because when you talk about how is it that Indians in the Caribbean maintain their Hindu identity, I argue that it's the fact that they were Hindu is why they are able to maintain who they were. And a lot of the discourse that happens is to try to wipe away the Hindu identity from those from the Caribbean. And it's something that I think needs to be spoken about more, which is why in all of the videos that I do, I always try to bring in some sort of like personal story or some sort of history about what happened there as to how we can maintain that part of our identity. And I tell you this story because when the Ram Mandir was being built, there was various accounts on social media that had posted about it, various Indo-Caribbean accounts, non-Hindu. They posted about it. And you go to the comments and all you see is constant pushback. To whereas one social media account took down their post. And I got really upset about it. And I just like I blasted them afterwards. I said, how is it that you don't understand that it was your ancestors who were Hindu that prayed to Sri Ram? This was an important landmark occasion because you go to any sort of like live stream of what was happening in Guyana or Trinidad during that, and so many people were celebrating it. But what gets amplified though on social media is not those voices because they're just the silent majority. It's the voices that want to push back that say that no, this needs to be framed as like Hindus like breaking down and why and you know they want to go after minorities.
Yep.
So I think that's one thing that you know all of this sort of comes together is that we as a family now need to sort of look back and find what is that we have in common.
Yeah, and we need to learn how to fight back. Fight back again constitutionally by the law. And like, you know, some of the most intellectual are from our communities, right? Like, you know, you can talk about Satya Nadella, you talk about, you know, Sundar Pichai, you talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Like, you know, and it's not just now. It goes all the way back to Swami Vivekananda, to Adi Shankaracharya, right? It goes all the way back. So I think it's very important for us to know and learn that, you know what, it's not okay for me to let things happen to my community just because I do not want to personally get impacted by it. Or just because I want to be accepted into a group. No, that's not okay. If you do this right now, you're probably not going to have a temple to go to in the next 100 years. And that is a scary thing because if you do not have, it's not just about the temple. If you do not have a temple to go to in the next 100 years, you do not have freedom to get married in a Hindu way in the next 100 years. You do not have freedom to cremate your family the way you would want to in the next 100 years. And it takes all the rights away. In our scriptures, we are not taught to go and, you know, behead everyone who does not believe in me. We are not taught that. We have taught to accept, and we do accept. But we are also taught to fight back, but we've forgotten that. We choose to forget it. And I think post-independence, unfortunately, a lot of historic text or history has been erased. Yeah, it may be the efforts and the hard work that Shambhaji Maharaj did, or Shivaji Maharaj did, or the Rajputs did, or the Deccans did. It's all forgotten. But a mass murderer named Aurangzeb was worshipped. I kind of worshipped him because that's what I was taught in my textbook.
In our textbook. Yeah, growing up, we never learned about even Trinidadian history or like other Indian history, I would say. Even our own kings or people we should have looked up to growing up. But we were glorifying the foreigners who came into our country, demolished our temples, Nalanda University, our scriptures, and we were glorifying them.
And the unfortunate thing is, right now, our own community is telling that, hey, why do you want to rename Aurangzeb Road to something else? Why do you feel the need to do that when you know it's going to hurt someone's sentiment? Why do you want to do it? Show me a road in Israel that is called as Hitler Road. Show me a road.
Wow. Yeah.
Jews did not never forgot the Holocaust. You cannot show me a Jew who forgot the Holocaust. But I can show you so many Hindus who don't know about Kashmiri Pandits. I did not know about Trinidad history. We do not know about what happened in Bengal. What is happening in Bangladesh right now.
Yep.
You want to talk about Bangladesh?
Yeah. So, you know, the interesting thing is that when you talk about history as a whole, so let's maybe take a step back. So we talk about Hindu history. I covered this in some of the classes that I taught. I did a whole year on just Hindu history. The reasons why we're not taught this is something that just boggles my mind, because it's the academics in India, they took the textbooks and they literally said, this is the history that we want everyone else to learn. And this just goes to show you that we as Hindus never found ourselves in the positions of power that we needed to. Because one of the easiest ways to sort of brainwash the next generation is to just feed them the information you want them to know.
Yeah.
So when you talk about growing up in school and your textbooks only glorified the Islamic rulers in India that literally tore down temples,
Yep.
what do you think that's doing to the mind of individuals?
Yep.
And now you get to all of these modern day conflicts, whether it be the Kashmiri pundits or what's happening in Bangladesh right now. I have no connection to any one of these people, but for myself, I see that as a Hindu struggle.
Yep.
So how is it that we get more and more Hindus to start understanding this? And I would say that it is probably a very lonely road to walk, because many Hindus don't want to touch it because they don't want to, they don't see themselves reflected in that community. And I think that's where a lot of work has to happen. And you could talk until you're blue in the face. Many Hindus are still not going to accept it because they see them as just being different from them.
And the worst part is they see these things as a propaganda.
Yes.
Do you see that word everywhere? Like,
Yeah.
this is my trigger word. When I see that this is history, this has happened, it's happening in front of your eyes, how can you say that this is a propaganda? Like, are you crazy?
Yep.
Like,
India is the only country where the minority oppresses the majority.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. How can Kashmiri Pandit exodus and massacre be a propaganda? Like, there is literally traces of their dead bodies right now.
And, and this is where the value of social media has certainly helped.
yeah.
Because now people are getting to tell their stories of what it is. Because prior to that, everything was just written by those that controlled the media, those that controlled the textbooks, and all of those areas. Growing up for myself, if you did a university course on Hinduism, guaranteed the book that was written was from a non-Hindu.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're learning about it. It is such an interesting sort of dynamic, because Hindus growing up here. So my brother did courses on it. I did some, and people growing up here want to learn more about Hinduism. So where do you go? Well, you don't know where to go to because the temples weren't really doing that. Temples, you go and you do pujas and you do all that. So you go to university.
Yeah.
And now you go to university and now you're reading a book about Hinduism written from someone who is a non-Hindu trying to teach you about your own tradition. Like, it is such
How
a
funny
such a
is that? Like, how could you teach us?
yeah. And this is where like my entry sort of started, because there was a lot of work done by Rajiv Malhotra. And one of the foundational books that I had read that really changed my life was Being Different, written by him. And he just goes into this whole sort of concept of Western universalism, where that has tainted everything to make it seem like that the Western idea is what is correct. And he did so much work on the textbooks. And that was reflected in India as well, is that if you control that, you really control what the next generation is learning. And I would say that when he did his work in the 90s and the 2000s, that really set the next generation on a different path.
Yeah.
So the question is, where do we go from here now, right? So 2025 to the next 20 years now.
Yeah. I mean, I know we can keep going on, but I think my closing comments would be forgive, but don't forget.
Yeah.
Because if you forget,
You'll be forgotten.
you will be forgotten. you will be you'll be a victim.
Yeah.
I think that's where we start, and then we sort of start, knowing what our rights are, follow your principles and go back. Such a beautiful culture, such a beautiful history. Like, I come from the Sringeri Mutt, okay, in Karnataka. And every time I go there, even right now, 2025, in Sringeri Mutt, there are Sanskrit scholars from all across the globe. They would come together to do Samvada and Samvedana, that means debates. And they debate, they speak in Sanskrit and they debate, right? The culture, the very thing that we speak about, freedom of speech, the liberty, freedom of expression, it all sort of starts from there. And I was just sitting there looking at pundits passionately debating about principles, about ideas. And, and on the other hall, there is music, there is classical Carnatic music, there is Sangeeta, there is, tabla, and it was so beautiful. Try and go back. Like, if you want to do a vacation, like, try and go back. Maybe go to the south and maybe go to the Sringeri Mutt or, the Thiruvananthapuram and those places. Maybe go to the west of India. Try going to Dwarka. Look at Dwarkadish. But do not go there as a visitor or as a tourist or even as a religious person. Go there like a historian would go. And then when you look at those sculptures, they tell stories. Each sculpture tells a story. And as you're, those pradakshina, my mom always tells, Papoham, Papa Karmaham, Papatma, and she tells that, and she does pradakshina pade pade. And I was doing that pradakshina, and I was just looking at those sculptures. I was trying to make sense out of it. And I was literally able to see the life of Adi Shankaracharya. Yeah. Traveling all the way from Kashmir, all the way down and setting up different mutts. That was the sculpture written, scriptured on the Sringeri mutt. So it's so beautiful. You go to the west, there is Dwarkadesh. You go to Kashi, you learn about Ganga. It's unbelievable. I think that would be a fascinating place to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to explore and learn, like, honestly. Even myself, like, I'm on this journey to every single day, and I'm trying to learn more about myself, about my religion. This is something that's really fascinating me. All of a sudden, like, maybe I wasn't really that much spiritual or didn't really care much about Hinduism maybe a couple years ago from now. But now, like, I wake up in the morning, I don't know, like, something just tells me that I need to give to the society. And I would do that only if I am more educated about these things, right? So honestly, it was such a pleasure sharing this space with both of you. I learned so much today. It was an amazing chat. So
thank you so much, Sean, for taking your time. Do you have any closing notes?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always talk about is how is it that you feel stronger as a Hindu? And I think growing up is something that you don't think much about, right? You just kind of just go with it and you just go along. It's not until you get older that these experiences that you go through, that you start reflecting a lot on, the path that you came from and where is it that you want to go. So my answer to that question is that education, of course, is key. Is that you have to keep learning, whether it be through videos like this, whether it be through reading or meeting individuals. Anyone who is on this journey, continue to learn. The second thing is that history becomes so important. Because none of us know the history of what happened. And it doesn't have to be like overarching history. It could be the history of your own families, about the struggles that they went through that can help you on your journey. And the second thing is that finding our voice and being an advocate for Hinduism, more and more people need to do it. One person alone can't raise the community up. Certainly they can be strong, but if everyone has the ability to just be that little bit stronger, those three things will help everyone and grow our community here stronger.
Amazing.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you for taking your time out.
Thank you for having me. Very much appreciated.
Yeah.